In 1787 in the United States, the revolution was still going on. A lot of people were unhappy with the direction of it, and there was a counter-revolution that brought us the Constitution we have now, which made the federal government supreme over the states, and included a provision that Congress had the power to locate a seat of government over which Congress, could exercise exclusive jurisdiction. Could. Not necessarily had to, but could.
The fight for D.C. voting rights started in 1801, and it started when the city was finally constituted. The founding fathers decided to create a federal city that would be separate from the states, and they called it a new Rome.
The framers saw D.C. as sort of an international city, certainly a city where the government would be based.
And back then it was mostly practical. They said that if you lived in the city, you were closer to the halls of power, you're closer to Congress, you're closer to the White House, so you had an outsized influence. And it was true back then, you know, mobs of people could march on the White House, march on Capitol Hill, and have much more impact than people living in Philadelphia, people living in New York.
But that was the only decision they made. They didn't decide where Washington, D.C. would be, who would live there. They certainly didn't decide how the place would govern itself, whether there'd be voting representation.
But I don't think they ever envisioned 600,000 people living in this capital city.
This was a revolution. There was no consensus. There was different opinions.
They said, well, we can't resolve these problems, and so we're going to leave it for a future Congress to resolve these problems. A future Congress will provide for voting representation and will provide for local government. Unfortunately, they didn't write any of this out, right? So the Constitution doesn't say Washingtonians shall not have representation. Washingtonians shall not have a local government. Washingtonians shall not vote for president. There was nothing like that. They created the district and they did nothing else.
I mean, now 200 years later, I think we can all say, well, how could the Founding Fathers who were promoting democracy, how could they have been looking to disenfranchise 600,000 people? We're really getting screwed on that one.
These men were advocating a radical philosophy called republicanism, which argued that people could govern themselves. It's an absurdity to think that they would want to create a city, in fact, the seat of federal government, where they would deny these basic liberties to the residents.
So I think if the framers came back today, they would be surprised that this is such a robust, diverse, wonderful population. So one of the things that we have to make sure that we do to modernize our voting process and in a way bring our voting process into the 21st century is to make sure that the citizens of D.C., those residents, have a right to vote.